This wasn't just a one-off bad night. It was a pattern that just happened to lean toward the reigning champs in the tightest moments of the series. Lexie Hull didn't mince words post-game. Her quiet fury spoke louder than any box score. She called it for what it was, a robbery. And fans agreed. Social media lit up with receipts, clips, screenshots, side-by-sides. The tape doesn't lie. And what it shows is a team that played their hearts out, only to be penalized for daring to rise above expectations.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
But here's what the refs couldn't take away: the legacy of this run. The message the Fever sent wasn't just about basketball. It was about grit, about culture, about how a 6-seed team nobody believed in almost rewrote the playoff narrative with duct tape, sheer will, and zero fear. The Aces may have moved on, but the Fever won something bigger: the respect of everyone watching. And if the WNBA doesn't fix its officiating problem, this won't be the last controversy it faces. Because fans are paying attention now. The Indiana Fever weren't just playing for a win. They were fighting to change the game. And they still might. Let's not sugarcoat this. The Indiana Fever just played their hearts out in one of the most intense and controversial playoff series the WNBA has seen in years, only to get pushed out in a Game 5 that felt more like a performance than a fair fight. But the real shock didn't come until the final buzzer sounded. Because while the scoreboard read, Aces win, the headlines were stolen by Lexie Hull, who walked straight off the court and straight into WNBA history for calling out the league and quitting the game she'd given everything to. Not retired, not benched, quit, after laying it all on the line and watching it all unravel under the weight of inconsistent, one-sided officiating that many say rigged the entire outcome. If you thought this was just another playoff exit, you weren't paying attention. Let's start from the top. The Indiana Fever weren't supposed to be here. 6th seed, banged-up roster, overlooked from day one. But what they lacked in hype, they made up for in something you can't coach: grit. From the jump, this team showed up to fight. They clawed through every round, outworking their opponents, surviving injuries, and proving every critic wrong. And when they met the reigning champion Las Vegas Aces, they didn't blink. They pushed them all the way to Game 5. Nobody expected it, least of all the league, which clearly had its golden child already penciled into the finals bracket. But as the series wore on, the whispers started. Questionable foul calls, missed obvious contact, a growing imbalance in free throw attempts that no one could ignore. Every game had moments where fans, coaches, and analysts alike were looking at each other like, is this actually happening? Yes, it was. And it wasn't subtle. Let's be clear. The Fever didn't lose because they lacked talent or heart. They lost because at every critical turn, the whistle leaned the other way. Foul trouble sidelined key players. Clean defensive plays got punished. Meanwhile, the Aces benefited from calls that had people replaying the footage frame by frame, trying to make it make sense. And through it all, the Fever kept showing up. Odyssey Sims, a hardship signee, scoring 27 points in Game 5 and dragging the team across the finish line on sheer willpower. Kelsey Mitchell, fighting through cramps, still lighting up the scoreboard like her body wasn't breaking down. Aaliyah Boston, getting mauled under the basket and still putting up numbers, still playing physical, still giving the Aces everything they could handle. And then there was Lexie Hull. You want leadership? It wasn't coming from the league office. It was coming from Hull, who played through injury, led defensively, and never backed down. She brought energy, accountability, and grit. She took charges. She guarded everyone. She was the embodiment of what the Fever had become, a team no one wanted to face because they didn't quit. Until she did. Not because she gave up, but because she had enough. After the series, Hull stepped away from the WNBA altogether. Not quietly, not vaguely, with purpose, with pointed words about accountability, fairness, and the absolute circus that had just unfolded in front of millions of fans. Her exit wasn't about her minutes or her stats. It was about what she saw, a series that, in her words, lacked integrity. That Game 5 was the final straw. You don't push through pain, keep your team alive in elimination games, and give everything to the sport only to have the final result decided by a whistle. Hull's departure lit a match under a firestorm that had already been brewing. And let's not pretend the frustration wasn't shared. You could feel the tension on the bench, see in players' faces, hear it in post-game interviews that were way too diplomatic for what was actually boiling underneath. This wasn't just a tough loss. This was a gut punch. Because how do you prepare for everything except biased officiating? The imbalance in calls wasn't just unfortunate. It was impactful. It shaped the outcome. It dictated rotations. It stifled momentum. And it did exactly what many fans feared. It protected the league's preferred narrative. The Aces as champions. The big market team with star power and sponsorships and shiny graphics. Meanwhile, Indiana was out here bleeding, figuratively and literally. And nobody blew the whistle. But if the league thought this would quietly fade, Lexie Hull had other plans. Her exit turned the spotlight right where it belonged, on the uncomfortable truth that officiating in this league has real consequences. It's not just about blown calls, it's about broken trust. And if players can't trust the system to give them a fair shot, how is this league supposed to grow? Because here's the kicker, the Fever almost won. With everything stacked against them, they nearly took down the champs. And that tells you everything. This team, even missing key pieces, still forced a Game 5 and nearly pulled off the upset. They didn't need luck. They needed one thing, a fair game. What they got instead was a clinic in how bad officiating can erase effort, how rigged energy can kill momentum, and how one-sided calls can undo months of preparation in a matter of minutes. But the Fever? They're not going anywhere. This team is built now. They've got resilience that doesn't go away in an off-season. They've got players like Odyssey Sims, who went from short-term contract to franchise hero in a week. They've got Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston, two core stars who have now learned exactly how tough playoff basketball and league politics can be. They've got Sha Petty stepping up in crunch time. They've got players who believe. And next year, they'll have Caitlin Clark back, healthy, rested, watching all of this unfold and getting ready to unleash. The loss? Hurts. No question. But what the Fever built during this series is bigger than a box score. They showed what championship DNA looks like. Not just talent, but chemistry, heart, and toughness. They didn't just survive this playoff run. They announced themselves. The league can ignore it. The refs can bury it. But the fans? They saw it. They felt it. And when the Fever come back next season, no one's going to underestimate them again. Lexie Hull might not be on the court, but her message will still echo. She left behind more than a roster spot. She left behind a challenge, a demand, a call for accountability. The WNBA can either answer it or keep playing defense. So what do you think? Should the WNBA address the officiating in that series? Was Lexie Hull's decision the only way to make a statement loud enough to get noticed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's get loud. If you're riding with the Indiana Fever next season, and you know they're coming back swinging, hit that subscribe button. Because this story isn't over. It's just getting started. Let's talk about what this team actually accomplished. 6th seed, injury-riddled, largely written off, and they pushed the reigning, media-favorite champions to the brink. They did it with hustle, with depth, with teamwork, and they did it in spite of calls that would have broken any other squad. Let's be very clear about something. The refereeing in this series didn't just raise eyebrows. It ripped the eyebrows off. From Game 1 to Game 5, there was a pattern that couldn't be ignored. Missed contact when Fever players drove to the rim. Touch fouls sending Aces stars to the line. Momentum swings stopped dead by whistles that made no sense on replay. This wasn't playoff officiating. It was preferential treatment in plain sight. The numbers didn't lie. The free throw differential? Skewed. The foul calls on key Fever players? Sound like a bad joke. How do you explain the Aces getting bailed out repeatedly while Aaliyah Boston gets body checked under the basket with zero whistle? You don't. You just hope people stop noticing. But people did notice. Coaches tried to stay composed in post-game interviews, but the frustration cracked through. Players' body language told the whole story. And fans? Fans were livid. Clips of blown calls went viral. Screenshots of contact with no whistle were everywhere. Everyone watching knew what they were seeing. except the three people with the whistles. And through it all, the Fever kept fighting. Odyssey Sims didn't come to Indiana for a legacy contract. She came in on a hardship deal and played like she had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Her 27-point performance in Game 5 wasn't just clutch, it was a statement. While the Aces leaned on their usual stars and familiar calls, Sims created her own chaos. Driving into traffic, drawing contact, hitting tough shots. She didn't flinch, not once. Kelsey Mitchell was another walking miracle. Cramps could have sidelined her for the entire second half. Instead, she kept pushing through, hobbling around the court, and still forcing defenders to chase her around screens. She never backed down, never stopped trusting the shot, even when her own body tried to give out. Aaliyah Boston, still in her first few years in the league, played with the poise of a 10-year vet. She knew the calls weren't coming. She knew the refs weren't going to help. So she adjusted, played through contact, changed her angles, did everything she could to stay on the floor and contribute. Her foul trouble manufactured chaos. And yet, she still anchored the team through it. And then there's Shop Hetty, barely used in the rotation for most of the year, and suddenly hitting critical buckets when the team needed them the most. That's the thing about this Fever roster. They're ready, top to bottom. When one goes down, another steps up, not out of luck, out of preparation, culture, belief. Lexie Hull embodied all of it. And her exit hurt, not just because she was a great defender. It hurt because she cared. She spoke out. She looked around and said, "This isn't right," and then had the guts to walk away. It wasn't some performative tantrum. It was a calculated move from a player who gave everything to the game and got slapped in the face with favoritism in return. That's not quitting. That's taking a stand. But the impact of Hull's departure is not just emotional. It's loud. When one of your hardest working, most vocal leaders walks away citing fairness and integrity, it hits different. It forces uncomfortable conversations. It puts pressure on the league to look at what just happened, not just on the floor but behind the scenes. Let's not pretend the WNBA hasn't struggled with officiating narratives before. But this wasn't just a miscall here or there. This was systemic. This was a pattern. And when a team like Indiana, who is outperforming expectations, gutting through injuries and rallying around each other, is met with a wall of one-sided calls, it starts to feel like the outcome was never in their hands to begin with. So what now? The Fever aren't going to forget this. They're going to use it. Every highlight clip they watch, every workout they grind through this offseason, every late-night gym session, it's going to be fueled by what they just endured. Not just the physical toll, but the mental one. Knowing they could have one. Knowing they should have at least had a chance without a ref-shaped asterisk hanging over every game. Next season, they're not coming back as wide-eyed underdogs. They're coming back with receipts, with chips on their shoulders, with a fan base that knows what was taken from them. And with Caitlin Clark returning, fully healthy and fired up, the offensive firepower is only going to get scarier. That's the scariest part for the rest of the league. The Fever are still growing. This wasn't their ceiling. This was just their first taste of what's possible. And now that they've seen how rigged the playing field can be, they're coming with something even more dangerous than talent: urgency. The future core is locked in. Aaliyah Boston, already a top-tier big. Kelsey Mitchell, one of the most consistent scorers in the league. Caitlin Clark, a generational shooter. Odyssey Sims, who needs to be re-signed. Depth players who are battle-tested now. And coaching that held this all together through chaos. They're not rebuilding. They're reloading. So while the Aces ride their protected path deeper into the playoffs, the real storyline, the one fans actually care about, is happening in Indiana. Because when the confetti settles and the media cycles out the winners, the Fever will still be here. Still grinding. Still remembering what they were denied. Lexie Hull may not suit up in a Fever jersey again, but she's part of the DNA now. Her decision was bold. It was loud. And it was justified. Whether or not the league acknowledges it, we saw it. And fans won't forget. So here's the call. Support this team. Not because they need sympathy. They don't. Support them because they earned it. Because they took a broken whistle and still turned it into a battle cry. Because every player on that roster showed you what real toughness looks like. Call out the bias. Demand better. This isn't just about one bad playoff series. It's about the future of a league that says it values competitiveness, yet continues to allow games to be tilted in plain sight. If you care about fairness, about effort, about stories that aren't just built in marketing meetings, then care about the Fever. They're doing it the right way. They're not begging for attention. They're forcing the conversation. The Aces may have walked away with a win, but Indiana walked away with something better: respect. From fans, from peers, from anyone who watched that series with their eyes open. And if the WNBA wants to survive long-term, it better start listening to what Lexie Hull was trying to say before she walked away. Integrity isn't optional. There's one thing every basketball fan knows. You can train for pressure, you can strategize for matchups, but there is nothing, absolutely nothing, you can do to prepare for biased officiating. That's the wall the Indiana Fever hit in Game 5. And for Lexie Hull, that wall wasn't just frustrating, it was unacceptable. Let's be real. Lexie wasn't the face of the team. She didn't need to drop 30 a night to make her presence felt. Her job was defense. Grit. Holding the team accountable in the huddle. Locking down whoever stood in front of her. And diving for loose balls like the floor owed her money. She was the emotional thermostat. The player who set the tone. And when things got chaotic, she didn't flinch. So when she's the one who speaks out post-game, who quits over the integrity of the game, that's not noise. That's a flare gun going off in the league office. Her decision was quiet in delivery, but loud in meaning. It said, if the system isn't going to protect players, if the refs are going to tip the scale every time a smaller market team dares to compete, then why keep pretending this is about fair play? It wasn't just a protest against the outcome of the series. It was a protest against what's become acceptable. Because let's be honest, this isn't the first time officiating has raised questions in the WNBA, but it is one of the clearest, most undeniable examples of favoritism playing out on a national stage. And it just happened to come at the expense of a rising, fearless team that refused to roll over and die. The Fever dared to disrupt the narrative. That's their crime. The Aces were supposed to cruise. They had the pedigree, the hardware, the star power. They were protected like crown jewels from Game 1. But every time they started to pull away, Indiana clawed back, without the help of the whistle. Every inch had to be earned, often twice, and in the end, they still nearly pulled off the upset. You think that didn't scare people? Lexie Hull's exit didn't just hurt Indiana, it embarrassed the league. Because now everyone's asking, what pushed her that far? What did she see? What did she feel on that court that convinced her it wasn't worth it anymore? Here's what she saw: a team giving everything they had and still getting nothing back, but ignored fouls, technicals for reacting, and silence when they asked for answers. She saw Odyssey Sims go full warrior mode and barely get a nod. She saw Kelsey Mitchell cramping on the bench while the refs extended possession for the other team with whistles so soft they could have been a bedtime lullaby. She saw effort being erased. And no matter how much film she watched or how many workouts she grinded through, she realized there's no training for that. That's when you know the system's broken, when effort stops being enough. But here's the thing the league may not be ready for. Lexie Hull's protest didn't silence Indiana. It amplified them. Because now the Fever aren't just fighting for a title. They're fighting for respect, for fair treatment, for the right to win or lose without the game being micromanaged by refs with apparent favorites. And they're not alone. Fans are fed up. Social media isn't letting this series slide quietly into the archives. Clips are still circulating. The debates haven't died down. And the silence from the league, that only makes it worse. Because every day they go without addressing what happened, they're validating the suspicion that this wasn't just incompetence, it was design. And if the WNBA really wants to grow, that has to change. Fast. You can't ask fans to invest in teams and players if you're not going to protect their investment. You can't market "the future is bright" while letting the whistle kill the momentum of a young team fighting for legitimacy. Lexie Hull may be gone from the game, but her voice is still echoing through it. And the Fever? They're not done. Not even close. They've got the talent. They've got the hunger. And now, they've got the receipts. And the rest of the league? Better hope the whistle is fair next time. Because if it is truly fair, then the Indiana Fever are come and take everything. So if you're still riding with them, sound off in the comments. Did Lexie Hull make the right call? Should the league address what happened in that series? And if you're not already subscribed, do it now. We're not done watching the drama unfold. We're just flipping the page to the next chapter.